damage appraisal and management within the shop that I was working at here in the Cincinnati market. I have cut my teeth working with these products over the many years. As we'll go through some of the history of the products, I can tell you when they were developed because I actually started using them back to the 80s, working on several of the vehicles. I'm an ASE certified collision technician. I'm an ASE certified automotive technician. I'm just as comfortable working in a mechanical shop as I am a body shop, but this is something that I really enjoy. I'm really passionate about. I have several family members that still work in body shop and a lot of close friends. So very close to this industry. It's very near and dear to my heart. As we're going through the presentations, by all means, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to let Melissa know what those questions are, and she'll share those with me, and I'll try to address those questions as I can. I'll also have my information at the end of the presentation if you'd like to get in touch with me at the conclusion of the presentation. To start off with, as Melissa said, we're going to be talking a little bit about the Ultra products and why are they different. Well, as we're going through the presentation for today, I'm going to talk a little bit, as I said, about the history of Evercoat, the basic composition of fillers and putties. Why are they different? The evolution of fillers up to the Rage Ultra product, and the evolution of the finishing putties up to the Metal Glaze Ultra product. And then after that, I'd like to talk a little bit about a product we have called 440 Express. What is it, and why do you need it? It's not a putty, it's not a filler, it's not designed to work with these products, but it really does help to give a final repair product that is going to be much, much easier to allow the primer to be used with. A little bit about the company here. Who is Evercoat? Well, Evercoat started out in 1953. That little building that you see right there is actually where the company started, not very far from this location. Over the years, the company grew, and around 1994, it was purchased and became part of ITW, Illinois Tool Works. Now we have distribution throughout Canada, Mexico, the United Kingdom, Europe, Russia, China, South America, South Africa, as well as Australia. That is actually the final look of the building right now, and if you were to look at it from the street, it doesn't really show it, but the building's about 1/4 of a mile long to give you an idea how much we've grown over the years. Throughout the years, some of the innovations we brought into the company, into the industry, if you will. In 1961, Evercoat was the first to introduce colored cream hardener. Prior to that, all of the hardeners were either white or clear, so it was very difficult for technicians to know when the product was completely mixed together, and they had a complete homogenization of the catalyst into the product to properly apply the material. And they really couldn't tell how hot, if you will, each of the mixing ratios were from one scenario to the next. So this was a big advancement into the industry. In 1972, we brought out the first high-build polyester primer, Feather Fill. That's still an oldie but a goodie, if you will. In 1981, we brought out the first 2K polyester glazing putty. That part number is 400. And that can looks the exact same as it did in 1981. In 1983, and I remember this product well, Evercoat introduced the first non-clogging body filler. At that point, most of the sandpaper was not PSA. You actually had to use the adhesive and then get it to stick onto the sanding pad. And if you had to replace it, you peeled it off and then reapplied more adhesive. So going to this style of product was a big game changer for the market. In 85, we brought out the Q-pads. Those are still a big product for us. In 1986, we brought out the first pourable lightweight polyester glazing putty. That's kind of a standard for the automotive collision repair market now. In 87, we brought out the first Rage product. That was our first premium body filler that we brought into the market. In 1990, we started a system called Metalworks. That enabled us to have additional adhesion property for the galvanized steel that was being used, as well as some of the aluminum that was being brought into the market, and also for some of the changes that were taking place for the transition from fiberglass over into SMC at about that same time period. In 1993, we brought out the first pump tainer for pourable glazing putty to help to reduce mess and make the dispensing a little bit easier. In 2002, we brought out FiberTech, which was primarily used for SMC, sheet molded composite, and rigid compounds. In 2003, we brought out the first hybrid lightweight fiber reinforced filler. In 2004, we introduced the first catalyzed repair adhesive in the universal cartridge. In 2008, we brought out the first 10-to-1 polyester dent filling compound with a multi-speed catalyst. And finally, in 2012, we introduced the newest 50-to-1 repair technology using the patent-pending technology with eco-resin. Now, a lot of times I get the question from customers or anyone I'm presenting the products to, well, what are the differences in fillers? What makes Rage different from Rage Gold different from Rage Ultra? Whenever I talk about that, I have to talk about how the fillers transition to what they are now. Traditional body fillers, or as they started out, were primarily heavyweight. They were composed of a resin and a talc. Most of the body fillers that are being used in the market now are lightweight fillers. They still contain resin, they still contain talc, but some of the talc is replaced with microbubbles for ease of sanding. A little bit more of an explanation of what the resin actually does in the product. The resin controls the adhesion to the substrate, the cure profile, surface tackiness, and the stain resistance. Polyesters over the years started out with a conventional resin that wasn't necessarily stain-free or tack-free. It evolved up to a premium style resin that we have in our Rage product, and ultimately up to the newest product we have out now, Rage Ultra, with the Eco resin. Talc is added in to provide strength and stability and durability for the repair. If you were to just try to repair a dent with resin, what happens is it wants to run right out. So you need something in there to thicken it up and help to give it some strength. Talc comes in a variety of sizes and shapes. It can be in a platelet talc, and it can be in a round talc. Larger sized talc particles can contribute to easier sanding, but they also contribute to some degree of absorption of the resins from the primers as well. So we have a blend of those products, of those talcs that go in all of our products. Microbubbles are added in to replace a portion of the talc to improve the sandability. There again, the bubbles that are used in the products can have different sizes and different densities. So depending on size and density of the talc, size and density of the microbubble, and what kind of resin it's put into, can all create different varieties of filler products. That brings us to the Eco resin. Well, what is the Eco resin that's actually in Metal Glaze Ultra and in Rage Ultra? Well, Eco resin is a patent-pending renewable technology that meets the ASTM B11 testing for corrosion resistance. What that means is we apply the product to a substrate, we place it in a salt spray chamber, and salt water is sprayed on it for 500 hours, and we monitor it for corrosion. Having the Eco resin in the products has enabled us to bring those products up to the point where they can withstand 500 hours of salt spray corrosion resistance. They're designed to have excellent filling properties while maintaining a stable, non-porous surface. What that means for the technician is it enables the primer to be applied and stay on the surface of the repair material and not be absorbed down into the repair material and absorbed into it, which is going to cause some issues down the road for post-paint shrinkage issues, dieback, and other situations. It enables an unparalleled sanding ability with finer grits. I'm not a chemist by any means. However, I can tell you that when the lab was first starting to work with these products, and I was asked to help with the development of these materials and also some of the testing, the field trials, I was amazed at the sandability of these products. They can be applied over a 180 grit sand scratch and sanded with 180 grit or even finer in some cases. So it's amazing how much easier it is to sand. And the biggest part of that is we're trying to create products that will make, ultimately, the technician's job much easier at the end of the day. And the Eco resin allows for maximum adhesion to a wider range of substrates. As the aluminum is starting to become more and more popular and more discussed, we find out that if you have a material that's very rigid to sand, what happens is that you're applying pressure onto the substrate and onto the material to sand it to shape. You're also moving that panel around a little bit. So all of the users that have applied this material over some of the thinner gauge metals and over some of the aluminum have found that it actually helps them to do the repair faster, and it helps to minimize how much that repair can walk around or increase in size, if you will. So now how do we get up to Rage Ultra? Well, we started out in 1950 with the traditional heavyweight style of product. That product was primarily being used to replace lead. At that time, all the dents were repaired with lead. I cannot use lead. I don't know how to use lead. I've tried it. It is an art form, and it is one that I cannot, haven't been able to figure out as of yet. In the 1970s, we began to formulate lightweight body fillers. That's where we started to replace some of the talc with microbubbles to make the products much easier to sand. In the 1980s, we brought out the first tack-free lightweight body filler, as well as another product that was called stain-free. What we did was merge those two technologies in 1987 to create the first premium product, Rage. Now that product has been around for 25 years. It's a good technology, but again, it is 25 years old. In 1997, we introduced Rage Gold. Now, Rage Gold was brought out with the introduction of a material called Hatonite to improve the sanding property. In 2003, we brought out Rage Extreme. Rage Extreme was brought out to be a little bit smoother and creamier and help cut down on some of the pinholes that some of the technicians had seen over the years. I'll explain a breakpoint as far as the differentiation of these after this next slide. In 2012, we brought out Rage Ultra. Rage Ultra incorporates that new eco-resin technology with an enhanced adhesion and improvement for sanding on aluminum and simplifies the repair process. Well, whenever I start talking about the products, obviously the question comes up, well, what is the difference? This product performs this way, that way. If I were using each product, which one would I want to go to? Well, I usually explain it this way with my little level here, my seesaw, and show the Rage product in the middle. Rage is the one that started out in 1987. It has a good balance of sandability as well as pinhole resistance. But again, we had technicians that wanted something that was going to be a little bit easier to sand, which is why we brought out Rage Gold. Later on, we had technicians that wanted to have something that was a little bit smoother and creamier to use. That's why we brought out Rage Extreme. Now, with the evolution of Rage Ultra, the question comes out, well, which one would I want to convert from or to the use of these materials? The way I explain it to them is this. If you're using traditional Rage, obviously there are features of Rage Ultra that they're really going to enjoy in the working of the product. It is much easier to sand than traditional Rage, and it has far more pinhole resistance than regular Rage. But that being said, Rage Ultra can also be migrated from Rage Gold or from Rage Extreme up into that product. So anyone that's using Rage, Rage Gold, or Rage Extreme will find something that they like about the Rage Ultra products. All right, I've got a video here. If some of you are listening through the voice over IP function, you may hear some audio. If you are, let Melissa know, and then we'll let the video play through, and then at the end of this, I have some key points that I'll discuss. If the audio is not playing through, then what I'll do is I'll explain a little bit about what's going on here. This is a short segment from one of the videos we have on YouTube. I've got a link at the end of this presentation where you can go and actually watch the full-length videos showing some techniques to help minimize some of the grinding steps. Oftentimes when I go into the shops, I see where the entire dent repair area has been ground down to bare metal. They're attaching the studs, and then they're grinding the studs back out, introducing a lot of heat in the grinding process and opening up a lot of the substrate. What we're saying in this video is just to help to minimize the amount of damage, if you will, that's being done to the factory corrosion protection. Throughout the process of the application of these materials, as well as our other materials, what we're trying to do is help to have the products adhere properly to the factory substrate. If the factory substrate is not compromised, we want to work with that in a way we don't have to worry about reintroducing any means of corrosion protection. If we don't sand it out or grind it out, we don't have to worry about putting it back in. What the video is showing here is actually to prep the surface with 80 grit in the deepest point of the repair area. If it did not require any pins to be pulled back out, if it did, obviously the pins would be removed, and then the remaining area would be sanded down with 80 grit to remove any of the compromised paint. For a smaller repair here, what we're showing is to use 180 grit on just a 3-inch DA. Many times I go into the shops and I see technicians using a 6-inch DA for all of the repairs. The 3-inch DAs and even smaller are becoming very popular. The point we're trying to make here is if the repair is smaller, by all means, definitely use a tool that's going to match the repair size. After this area has been sanded in the center of the damage with 180 grit, what we're going to do is come back in and feather edge on the perimeter of it with 180 grit. What that does is create a true 180 grit sand scratch at the end of the repair, because that is the grit that we're going to actually sand it out with. And on the large repair, we're coming back and we're feather edging around the perimeter of the repair with 180 grit. So we're having 80 grit in the center and 180 grit around the perimeter of the repair. All right. Now, the key points that we were showing for this video are, number one, starting the repair off by cleaning with soap and water. We want to remove any of the biological contaminants, the road salt. We're hopefully getting through the end of the summer, the end of the winter here, going into the summer and spring seasons where we're not going to have much of that anymore. But removing the road salt, that's not going to be very well done with a wax and grease remover, as well as any tree sap or any bug residue that might be on the vehicle. So those need to be removed with soap and water. Then follow that up with a wax and grease remover. Wax and grease remover, obviously, we're going to remove the wax, the grease, and the silicones. Oftentimes, I'll hear the statement being made that, well, I don't see anything on the surface, so I don't necessarily need to use a wax and grease remover. Obviously, if they're clear, it's going to be difficult to see. So it's a good train of thought to go ahead and remove those before the sanding process. As you saw in the video, to minimize the amount of grinding that's being done for the repair, using the 3-inch DA where applicable, preparing the center of the repair with 80 grit, and then feather edging outside of the repair into the factory clear coat with 180 grit. And we'll show you in this next video why we're going to be doing that. Starting off with the dust removal process, it's a very simple step, but I see a lot of technicians trying to apply material over top of a dusty surface, and it cuts down on the adhesion. Second thing we're showing here is to mix the product up. Be sure you mix the product up so you have a consistent product from the beginning to the end. And as the cardboard went through, talking about mixing the material up on a non-porous substrate. Proper catalyzation for the products. This is a 2-inch puddle. It requires a 1-inch bead of cream hardener for a 50-to-1 or 2% by weight mixing ratio. And this is a 4-inch puddle, and it's going to require a bead across the entire diameter of the puddle, so it's going to require a 4-inch puddle. Anything larger than a 4-inch puddle would require at least a bead all the way across and up to a bead and a half for an 8-inch puddle. So if it's a 6-inch puddle or an 8-inch puddle, again, it's going to have at least one bead from one edge to the other. If you notice in the video, we're putting the big red mark across there to not apply it that way, but instead apply it in very thin coats just to wet the surface out. This technique will really help to cut down on the pinholes and maximize the adhesion for the product. After the surface has been wet out, slowly build the repair material up to the shape and thickness that you would need, up to a maximum thickness of no more, after it's sanded, of 1/8 of an inch with the filler. The putties can go up to a maximum thickness of about 1/8 of an inch, the filler 1/4 of an inch, my apologies. After it's been spread out, if you can, take a spreader and try to level out around the edge into the clear coat where it's been sanded with a finer grit to create that transition. It's going to make the sanding process much, much easier on the back end. Otherwise, what happens is if there's a very sharp edge, it creates more of a sanding challenge to try to sand it down to the contour without sanding through the clear coat just outside of the perimeter of the repair. Here what we're showing is if you do need to sand for large repairs, and we understand sometimes if you're having a large repair, the side of a quarter panel, a pickup bed, you want to speed up the sanding process. If you do that, this product sands with 80 grit, like anything else would sand with a much coarser grit. So only use it in the center of the repair over the product itself, and then go to a finer grit, such as 180 we're showing here on a sanding block for the smaller repair. After the repair has been sanded to the desired contour, come back with 180 grit on the DA and sand out any of the straight line scratches. What that's done now is we have a consistent feather edge of 180 below the repair material and 180 above the repair material. So we're not going to have any deep sand scratches or grind marks or any straight lines that are going to have any repair material in it. The second sanding step there was actually showing if there were any straight line scratches that were missed, to come back and then sand it out with the DA sander again to remove those. The key points for that video were dust removal before the application of the repair material, proper mixing of the product before the use. It doesn't have to be mixed every time you use the product, but when you first get the product, it's a good idea just to mix up to make sure it's going to be consistent from the beginning to the end. Proper catalyzation of the repair material. We want to make sure it's at a 50-to-1 or 2% mixing ratio. So as I said, a 4-inch puddle, edge to edge. Anything larger than a 4-inch puddle would, again, be edge to edge. And if it's up to an 8-inch puddle, edge to edge, and then halfway across again. The 2-inch puddle only requires a 1-inch bead. The initial application process, again, as you saw in the video, applying the product very thin. You should be able to actually see through it just to wet the surface out. The initial sanding with 180 grit up to no coarser than 80 grit, really. Removing any of the straight line scratches after the repair has been sanded with the dual action sander to make it much easier for the primer to work with. And then finally inspecting for any pinholes that might be in the repair before it moves on to the paint shop. This is a poster that we actually have to help illustrate the key points in the use of the product. Again, it highlights the cleaning, straightening, the preparation of the repair area, application of the product, sanding and feather edge, and then finally, again, the inspection before moving on to the next stage. So that explains a little bit about the Rage Ultra product. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about the Metal Glaze Ultra product. And for that, I'd like to kind of discuss a little bit of the history of the putties. How did they get up to this point? Well, starting back in the 1960s, the putties that were primarily used were a one-component or lacquer-based material. You applied those materials, and you had to actually wait until the material would dry before you could sand it. So thicker applications took longer. In 1983, we brought out the first 2K polyester for repairing surface defects to filler that could also be used for some minor repair damage as well. And that product, again, was polyester glazing putty, part number 400. In 86, we brought out the first pourable product, and that was Glaze Coat. In 1990, we brought out our Metal Glaze product. That was the first product that was also incorporated into the Metalworks system. And we put that into the pump tainer in 1993 to make it a little bit easier to dispense. It's been around for quite a while. As you can see, this is a 25-year-old product. And in 2005, we brought out the Metal Glaze OEM. What the advancement for that product was, it was the first pourable lightweight product, again, to meet the ASTM standard of for corrosion resistance up to 500 hours. That product has been out for 10 years now. So now it brings us up to the newest of the Metal Glaze line, the Metal Glaze Ultra. This is the first product to use putty to use a eco resin, as we discussed a moment ago. It meets the ASTM B117 standard for corrosion resistance. Very smooth spreading and self-leveling material, and can be applied directly to the sanded OEM clear. This is a quick chart that I actually pulled from one of our flyers to show the sandability of Metal Glaze Ultra as compared to any of the other premium body putties that are on the market. Easily you're going to see a savings of 20% more on paper for usage because of the sandability of the product. It's not going to load the sandpaper, and the sandpaper is going to work far, far more efficiently. Here's a quick video to help show the use and preparation of the repair product. Again, starting off with soap and water, and then coming back with the wax and grease remover to remove any of the wax, grease, or silicones. Next, preparing the surface with a 180 up to a 220 grit to only lightly sand the area. At this point, what we're going to do is apply the product to the factory clear coat, to the factory finish, and not have to worry about sanding through or removing that and then having to readdress any corrosion additives or primer in that area to get the corrosion protection back up. I actually added this little trick in here to help show if you have a very small rock chip, instead of actually using a sander, just use a small strip of sandpaper. That repair, after I was done with it, it was about the size of a dime. So there again, trying to help keep the sandability down to a minimum. The key point for that particular section were to clean the area with soap and water, and then with the wax and grease remover, just like with the Rage Ultra. What we're trying to do with the small repair scenario is to maintain the integrity of the factory paint. This we're talking about with the Metal Glaze Ultra product, but again, for a smaller repair, the Rage Ultra product could also be used in that manner. Sanding out the areas where the factory finish was compromised. If there is a chip or a scratch, something that's actually broken through the clear coat, we actually want to remove that and get that down and feather that out. We don't want any surface irregularity or texture to be below the product. Using 180 grit to prepare and feather edge into the factory clear coat. And again, as you saw by that very last segment, keeping the repair as small as possible. Now I'll show some techniques for the application of the product. Again, the catalyzation for a 4-inch puddle would be from edge to edge, and for a 2-inch puddle to be from the center to the edge. What we want to avoid is too little cream hardener, because too little cream hardener added into both of those products is going to cause slow curing, a long dry to sand time, sandpaper clogging, potential shrinkage, and even pore adhesion. So we need to make sure that they're properly cured. Same technique as before. The first coat should go on very thin. You should actually be able to look through the repair material. And then after you actually wet the surface out, go back in and slightly start to build the repair material back up to the desired shape. Using the same technique as on the filler, create that transition with the spreader so it's going to make it much easier to sand. And then on the smaller repairs, I typically just go straight into a hand sanding application. Once it's been sanded, I didn't actually put that segment in there, but I did use a DA sander over top of it to remove any of the straight line scratches, and then remove all the dust to prepare it for the next segment. The key points for the small repair process: dust removal before the application, proper catalyzation of the materials at 50:1 or 2%. The initial application process is the same for both large and small repairs to wet the surface out and then build the repair material up. Initial sanding with 180 grit by hand for smaller repairs. Removing the straight line sand scratches with a dual action sander, and then the final inspection. One of the points that I usually bring up when I'm in a repair scenario in a shop explaining the use of the products, when the question comes up, well, that looks good for a smaller repair, but what about a much larger repair? If you're doing a larger repair, what I explain to the technician is go ahead and get the initial shape of the repair material, but be sure for the second application, because it's very difficult to apply it all in one application and be done and have all the body lines that you need. But for the second application, then really focus on applying the product with a high degree of pressure to help cut down on any of the pinholes that could possibly appear. And again, we've got the poster showing the small repair process with Metal Glaze Ultra, again highlighting cleaning the area, straightening, sanding with 180 grit, the application of the product, sanding in feather edge with 180 grit, and then again the final inspection.
Hey Tim, I have a question.
Yes.
What will happen if you over-catalyze filler or glaze?
Well, the first thing you'll notice is it's going to actually cure the product up prematurely. We design all the products to catalyze at 2%. If they're catalyzed higher than 2%, what that does is it shortens down the dry to sand time, and it actually can make it a little bit harder because we're figuring what the sandability is going to be for the products at 15 to 20 minutes. When it's over-catalyzed, it's going to become harder faster, so it's not going to sand quite as easy. So if you had two repairs side by side, one catalyzed at 2%, one catalyzed higher than 2%, you'll find out that it's going to be a little bit more difficult to sand, to shape. If someone's typically over-catalyzing, I usually see that occurring in the cooler months when they're trying to compensate for their shop being cold, the product being cold, or the vehicle being cold. These products, they rely on chemistry. The chemistry works best at about 60 degrees Fahrenheit on up. So the closer you can get the substrate, the product, to the 60 degree Fahrenheit mark and not have to over-catalyze, it's really going to make the repair process much easier. A good question, though. Thank you. All right. 440 Express. Now, this is where I want to talk about this product a little bit. It's not a putty. We still have a lot of questions on how to apply this particular product, what makes this putty different. That's why I wanted to kind of explain this a little bit here. It is a 1K polyester product. It's a patent pending technology that we brought up a few years ago. This allows for a quick and easy wipe-on, wipe-off application. There's no sanding required for this particular product. Once it's applied, you can apply a primer surfacer in as short as 15 minutes. And it helps to fix some of the micro pinholes that could be seen in the repair. Oftentimes I get the question asked of me, well, what is a micro pinhole? The micro pinhole are those little challenging no-see-ums, as I refer to them, whereas if the primer surfacer were applied, you don't see them before the primer surfacer is applied. It's not seen as the material is being applied, but then after the first coat starts to flash off before the second coat, some of those areas will actually show up and they would think that now they have a pinhole in the area, they've got a contaminant in the area, which is one of the reasons we saw a need for this particular product. This particular product is applied very easy. I've got a very short video to help show how this particular product is applied. And I do apologize for having to look at the same guy all through all of these. We're trying to do something with lighting and makeup, but we'll see what we can do. All right. Again, starting off with this product, simple shake of the product to make sure, again, we have a homogeneous mix before we apply it. Using the 439 applicator foam pad, apply a very small amount, only about the size of a pea to a size of a dime, and wipe the product into the sanded surface. This can be applied over a 180 grit sand scratch. It can be applied over a 220 grit sand scratch. All you really want to do is just apply the product over the entire area. What this will do is help to show any of the micro pinholes. It will find them, it will fill them, and it will fix them all in one application. That's as heavy as the coating should be right there. If an excess amount is actually applied, you can allow it to dry and then lightly scuff it with 400 grit, or just use the foam applicator pad as I showed there. The areas that you could see there, actually, if you look at the few areas, and I can see if I can pull my pointer up in here, some of those areas right there were so fine we actually couldn't see them. I actually had to mark that up just a little bit so the camera could pick it up. But it will find and fill the very, very smallest of micro pinholes, as well as, to a degree, some of the smaller pinholes to help alleviate the process. Again, the application technique for this product, very simple. Shake 440 Express and apply it to the 439 applicator. Wipe the 440 Express over the entire repair area. And as you can see in the picture number 3, comparing it to picture number 1, all it really does is just slightly darken up the repair area and helps you to actually see where some of the micro pinholes are. Again, that repair was not actually that bad. We just had to do that in order for the camera to be able to pick up some of what the micro pinholes were in that particular repair product. So the conclusion of what we've been talking about here, the EverCoat Ultra products can be applied over and sanded with a much finer grit. The coarser grits are not required to speed up the repair process. Oftentimes I see in the shops where the coarser grits are being used because of speed. These products can sand very fast with a much finer grit. So in order to create the deeper sand scratch to speed up on the front end of the repair, those sand scratches are still going to be there and possibly even out beyond the perimeter of the repair material. If we don't create those sand scratches, we don't have to worry about the mapping down the road. Proper application technique can help to reduce and hopefully eliminate any of the pinholes in the repair product. And then using the 440 Express product before the application of the primer surfacer to help maximize the primer's performance. What we're finding out in the process of helping to alleviate any of the conditions of the micro pinholes is a lot of people are coming back saying that their primer is working more efficiently, whereas before they might have had to put 3 coats of primer, they're only having to put down maybe 2 wet coats of primer, and it's saving a lot of material cost for them. This concludes the presentation, but if anyone has any questions, I'd like to open those up, and it could be on any of the products we've talked about for the day, or if you have any questions for me in the meantime.
Yeah, feel free to ask Tim any questions, and I'm just going to repeat that after the webinar, I will send everybody who's on this presentation, I'll send you Tim's information so you can follow up with him as well.
If you have any questions on some of the videos, or if you'd like to see any of the other videos we have, here is a link to our YouTube channel. If you go there, you can see all of the videos we've put out for plastic repair, as well as for the Ultra products and any of the other materials that we've put out. Also, I have those in a variety of languages as well. As I said in the beginning of the presentation, we have distributors globally, so therefore I have a lot of different languages for the products as well. And again, here's my contact information. If you think of a question later on, please, by all means, feel free to give me a call or contact me directly at tmckinney@evercoat.com.
Well, I'm not seeing any questions. You were just very thorough, so you did a great job. Again, follow up with Tim if you do, and we're going to conclude the webinar, and we appreciate everybody participating, and we'll be in touch with future training opportunities. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Bye, everyone.